Thank you for taking time to engage in an important conversation the Board of Trustees have asked me to engage our community in. Students, faculty, staff, alumni, and friends have been invited to take part in 9 conversations scheduled throughout the region during the course of the fall. For those not able to engage in this conversation, we wanted to put together this information to help inform and invite your participation. The subject is the history and use of our nickname or mascot at Susquehanna University. I'll be joined by colleagues Linda McMillan, who is Provost and Professor of History, who will talk about the Crusades. Ron Cohen, the Vice President for University Relations, will join us and will talk about the history of mascots. Thank you again for taking part in this way, and we look forward to having your feedback. So let's begin with a little of our own history. Susquehanna University was dubbed the Little Crusaders in 1924 by a Philadelphia sports writer. This came during a time of a need for reform in intercollegiate athletics. Luther Grossman was our athletic director, and he was known as a leading reformer seeking to restore integrity to intercollegiate athletics. This led to a headline in which we were dubbed the Little Crusaders from Susquehanna. Sometime after that newspaper headline, the campus came to adopt Crusaders as its nickname and mascot of its very own. The evidence of this is seen through images from yearbooks from days past. They include the use of the Maltese cross on our football helmets and the presence of a Crusader knight with a lance that became known as our mascot through the 1960s and 1970s. In the late 1980s, through an intentional campaign to rethink the university's logo, wordmark, and other images, an intentional change was made, and a Crusader flag came to be the symbol that was adopted with an intentional distancing from the medieval Crusaders iconography that had been present in an earlier time. This, of course, came as a consequence of some growing concern and sensitivity as Susquehanna was seeking to be more intentionally a campus that was open, welcoming, and inclusive of more and more people from more and more different backgrounds. The iconography continued to be a source of concern and lamenting among students, and the desire for a mascot to be present on campus led in the late 1990s and around 2000 to the birth of a tiger who wore a cape known as the Caped Crusader. The need to replace that costume led students 2 falls ago to consider different alternatives. At the end of the day, the struggles that our students had in trying to identify new iconography has continued to be present. It's really these conditions that led the Board of Trustees to think that this was the time for us as a community to engage in this conversation. I'm delighted that you have taken time to come together in this way, through this medium, to learn and to share your own thoughts.
Jay has given you our story of the Crusades. Unfortunately, most people who hear the word crusade do not think about Division III sports. Rather, they carry in their minds knights, castles, and medieval warfare. And that is the story I want to make you aware of now. So what are the Crusades as a historical reality? The Crusades are defined as a military action that is religiously sanctioned by God through a papal bull or letter. Christianity was originally a pacifist religion. Compromises with military action come with acceptance into the Roman Empire and expand with the conceptualization of the just war theory by St. Augustine. So while military action comes to be tolerated, it is not until the Crusades that it is glorified, i.e. that God is sanctioning this work. First called by Pope Urban II in 1095, crusade was applied to a variety of actions even as late as the Armada's attack on England in the 16th century. Crusades were aimed at the religious other, primarily Islam, but also Jews, heretics, and even indigenous peoples in the Americas. Consequently, crusades took place in a variety of locations: Jerusalem in the Middle East, southern France, in Spain as the Spanish Reconquista, and also the conquistadors that come to the Americas came under a papal bull of crusade. The Crusades were wildly popular. You got to travel, have adventure, you got to engage in military conquest, and if, unfortunately, you were killed, you were guaranteed a place in heaven. This point in the Middle Ages was a time in which families and dynasties were consolidating their power by concentrating their land holdings in the hands of the oldest son. This created the problem of what to do with younger sons. Monasteries were one answer. Making a name for oneself through military conquest was another. The Crusades offered such an opportunity for both wealth and glory. The Crusades were instrumental in fueling the commercial revolution of the Middle Ages and the rise of capitalism. Throughout history, it seems that when one stopped fighting an enemy, one immediately started trading. The Italians are instrumental here. They actually did not fight in the Crusades very often. Rather, they provided transport and supplies to Northern Europeans on their way to the Middle East. This became the backbone of long-distance trade. The Crusaders themselves returned with a developed taste for spices, silks, and other fine goods that further fueled this market. So these are two ways that the Crusades advantaged Western Europe, both politically and economically. However, not all outcomes of the Crusades were positive. Historians also argue that the Crusades marked the rise of anti-Semitism in Western Europe. Not that life for Jews were perfect under Christian rule prior to this moment. However, once violence was sanctioned against one religious other, it broke out more often against Jews as well. One particularly significant incident were the Rhineland massacres in Germany in the 12th century. This was a systematic program fueled directly by the Crusades. Whole communities of Jews were wiped out. This is an incident whose victims are still remembered in Jewish religious ceremonies to this day. Finally, I want to say something about the relationship between the concept of crusade and the concept of jihad. Both ideas focus on religiously sanctioned violence. The two concepts were created and honed at the same time and in dialogue with each other. Indeed, historians argue about which side first came up with the reward of paradise in the afterlife. So too, just as the word crusade has over time come to have other, less bellicose meanings associated with it, so too the concept of jihad in Islamic culture can also have larger meanings than military action. However, just as the word jihad falls on Western ears in a particular way, so too crusades creates discomfort when heard by Muslims. I have taught about the Crusades at Susquehanna for over 25 years. Every time I have taken up this topic, I always give students an opportunity to reflect on the Crusader mascot. Prior to 9/11, students' response was on a spectrum of enthusiasm to indifferent. However, after 9/11, students became increasingly uncomfortable in these conversations about Crusader. They expressed concern for Jewish and Islamic students, but primarily they came to understand that the symbol of the Crusader carried baggage. It was politicized in some ways. And more than anything else, they longed to have a symbol and a mascot that was not politicized and that could be used in a variety of contexts.
The word mascot is believed to come from a French term meaning lucky charm. A college nickname or mascot serves as a source of identification and pride for people affiliated with an institution, primarily students, alumni, and fans of the school's sports teams. Some schools only have a nickname. Others have a nickname and a mascot that are different, but the majority have a nickname and mascot that are the same. Sports teams started to use animals as mascots to provide extra entertainment for spectators. Most used live animals, often predators, that were expected to roar or strike fear into the hearts of their opponents. They, of course, now include much less fearsome creatures like birds and insects, colors like Harvard's crimson, and even natural events like the University of Miami's hurricanes and the University of Hawaii's rainbows. Scores of institutions have changed mascots and nicknames. Some changes are the result of unusual circumstances or institutional evolution. Some reflect changing social attitudes and norms. In 2005, an NCAA ruling banned schools with Native American mascots from participating in postseason play, which prompted many to change their names. Susquehanna shares its nickname, Crusaders, with 16 other colleges across the country. Two of those, Capital in Ohio and Valparaiso in Indiana, are also Lutheran institutions. There are a number of institutions that have left the nickname Crusader for something else. I want to share two examples with you, one school that changed and one school that stayed. The one that stayed is Valparaiso, which spent much of the decade between 2000 and 2010 wrestling with and debating the "should we change" question. Valparaiso decided to stick with the name Crusader, but with a couple of modifications to its mascot, which was reintroduced in 2010. First, the Crusader figure, which had been a knight bearing a sword, traded in the sword for a shield. That shield features a large letter V, symbolizing that the Crusader is defending the values of Valparaiso. Second, the Crusader became faceless. An armor faceplate obscures the face and has the intent of suggesting the Crusader can be male or female. Even with these changes, we know the discussions at Valparaiso continue and is ongoing. Wheaton College in Illinois made the change from Crusader to Thunder. Wheaton is a Christian residential liberal arts college and graduate school established in 1860 and is guided by its original mission to provide excellence in Christian higher education, according to its website. Here is what Wheaton's president, Dwayne Litfin, said in announcing the name change from Crusader to Thunder 15 years ago. "We are hard-pressed to find anything in these disastrous waves of fighting that our Lord might have approved, despite the fact that the conflict was ostensibly carried out in His name."
Thank you very much for taking time to learn in this way, and we invite your participation by providing feedback that I will take into consideration in making a recommendation and will also provide to the Board of Trustees. If you will, follow the prompts that follow the completion of this video, and you will be guided to a way to provide directly your feedback. Thank you again for caring about Susquehanna and for taking time to take part in this important institutional discussion.